Tonight, we dive into a truly remarkable game of chess. A little more than 100 years ago, in April 1918 in Berlin, a completely new chess opening crashed onto the grandmaster scene. An opening so wild, so audacious, and so original in its concept that it broke one of the greatest geniuses in the world. So sit back, relax, and join me as once again we explore the infinite beauty of chess. d4, knight to f6. We are in the Café Kerkau in Berlin. The players are hungry. Food is heavily rationed. And in about 6 months' time, Germany and its allies will lose World War I. And I wonder what it must have been like for the players and the spectators to lounge in these luxurious saloons with no coffee, no wine, no tobacco, no meat, trying to concentrate on this little war game while destruction on an unprecedented scale was taking place all over Europe and beyond. With the white pieces, we see the absolute legend of chess history, Akiba Rubinstein, who in this position played pawn to c4, as he had done so many times before, expecting perhaps a quiet maneuvering positional game that he would win in the same way that he had won so many quiet maneuvering positional games before. Here we see Rubinstein in the first round of the tournament, the Four Masters tournament, facing off against Karl Schlechter. That game was a draw. But now he is in round 3, and he has the white pieces against a grandmaster by the name of Milan Vidmar, with the black pieces here. And Milan is of course a grandmaster, strong player, but nowhere near the strength of the absolute behemoth of chess understanding that is Akiba Rubinstein. But, Milan Vidmar has a secret. His tutor, Abonnier, a Hungarian master, has been developing a new opening for some years. It has been tested by players such as Maroczy and Abonnier himself, but it had never been seen outside their own country of Hungary. And in this trivial-looking position, Vidmar played a move that challenged the great philosopher of chess so much that it cost him not only the game, but the entire tournament. And the move that the genius Rubinstein just could not handle was the Budapest Defense, pawn to e5. I have played this opening so many times. If you are regular on the channel, you have seen me beat various chess computers with it, and I have made a video on how to play it as well. And just imagine that 104 years ago, This was a completely earth-shattering moment for one of the best chess players in the world. What is this about? It is a gambit. A gambit in chess is when you offer up a pawn for some compensation, usually speedy development of your stronger pieces. The word gambit comes from gambitero, which means something like to put your leg forward. It's an Italian word. It's to put your leg forward in order to trip somebody. And trip old Rubinstein, Vidmar really did. Rubinstein is a classical player, and he knows that the only way to refute a gambit is to accept it. So he played pawn takes e5, like so. The game is on. And this is, if you are wondering, the correct move. So we see knight to g4, attacking the pawn here, and attacking f2. So usually you would be loathed to move the same piece twice for no good reason. You would be loathed to give up a pawn in the opening, and you are even allowing white a lot of central control with these pawns. So what is going on? Well, first of all, this pawn is being looked at by this knight. It is eyeing that pawn. Hello, pawn. I think I'll go and capture you. While the knight here is infiltrating. Look how far it's already gone into white side of the board. Also looking here at f2. So it can be actually a surprisingly deadly piece here. But what is more surprising to me is that Rubinstein, over the board, having never seen this before, found the move that grandmasters today, more than 100 years later, consider to be the best move. And that is to defend the pawn with the bishop. So what, do I hear you ask, what made the classically minded chess player Rubinstein put the bishop out before the knight? Because you could have defended with the knight, and one of the classical chess principles is put the knight out before the bishops. The reason is simple. The knight has short legs. It takes it a long time to get to where it wants to be, where the bishop can swoop as long as it wants to, and therefore it is often wiser to delay the development of the bishop long enough so that you know exactly where you need it, so you don't have to waste a move just playing it somewhere only to move it again later. But Rubinstein knew exactly where he needed the bishop. He needed it on f4. He played bishop to f4. Because if he had played knight to f3, defending in this way, he could see that Vidmar could play bishop to c5, coordinating an attack here on f2. He would have to play pawn to e3, and now the bishop can no longer come out to defend the pawn where he needs it. This here is also playable for white, but it is inferior. It is what is known as the Adler variation. And Gisa Maroczy had already demonstrated to Vidmar how strong an attack black can get in this position. But the genius Rubinstein didn't play the knight out. He played the bishop out to f4. we saw knight to c6. So we get a sense of what's going on here. It's about trying to recapture the pawn. Both of these knights are eyeing that pawn. And maybe they can recapture it with advantage. Now, however, Rubinstein can play knight to f3, the correct move in this position. This is still considered theory by chess grandmasters. This is considered to be the best move in the position, and that is also confirmed by the incredibly strong chess programs we have today. Bishop to b4, check by Vidmar. Today, when I play the Budapest Gambit or the Budapest Defense, I play bishop to b4 check before putting out the knight. That is just a little improvement that has been found, just to get a little more information and give away as little information as possible. So here is the big moment. And here is the first slight misjudgment, ever so slight misjudgment by Rubinstein. And it's not much. But he plays knight to c3. It's a fine move, it's a good move. It is part of chess theory still. But the grandmasters today recommend knight on b to d2 instead of knight to c3. And the point is that here, if the bishop tries to exchange itself for the knight, we will not compromise our structure. On c3, the bishop can capture the knight. Bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3, and we have these doubled pawns that are quite weak and awkward. Obviously Rubinstein was aware of this nuance. But he played the knight to c3 anyways, because he didn't want to give up the pawn. He is ahead by one pawn. The only way to refute a gambit is to accept it, and Rubinstein was simply saying, okay, you have sprung this bizarre new opening concept on me, but you have given me a pawn. I will take that pawn, and I will keep it all the way to the end of the game, and I will use that pawn to win the game. And he knew that the logical move here by black is queen to d7, putting a third attacker on the e5 pawn here. And because he had played knight to c3 and not knight b to d2, he could now play queen d5, defending the pawn once more. Vidmar starts to inflict some damage. First, he takes on c3 with the bishop, like so. That is check, it must be respected. Only logical move is pawn on b takes c3, like so. And here Vidmar played queen to a3, attacking the weak pawn here on c3, the weakness that he has inflicted. Already in the next round of the tournament, Rubinstein had the white pieces again and faced Schlechter again, who also, to what must have annoyed Rubinstein to no end, also employed the Budapest Gambit. He had simply seen the game between Rubinstein and Vidmar, written it down, or just remembered it, took it home and analyzed it and played it again. And in that game, he employed the Budapest Defense and played pawn to f6 in this position, not queen to a3. And today, if white plays this variation, pawn to f6 is the recommended move by grandmasters. So Schlechter figured that out more than 100 years ago. However, Vidmar played queen to a3, not as strong as pawn to f6, but a very, very challenging move. And we can see how tough this must have been for the very, very classical player Rubinstein. Very classical, very positional. He wants to take control of the center, he wants to develop his pieces, get castled and play solid positional chess. And now he is in this position where his queen has been lured out into the middle of the board. The pawns are doubled 2 times. These pawns are doubled, these pawns are doubled, and he has sort of made a little camp here in the middle of the board, being surrounded by the black pieces getting attacked from all angles. And he has the advantage, he does have the extra pawn, but this position is just so unusual and so out there compared to how players really played back then, that it must have been very, very tough. And we will see just how tough in the game. The pawn on c3 here, that is attacked. Some chess engines, if you run it through some of the chess engines at certain depth, they will recommend the move rook to b1 here, not protecting unprotecting basically the a pawn, and not protecting the c pawn. So you come in with check, and then you go back with the bishop, and it's just basically desperately trying to give the pawn back in an attempt to get a more sensible position of the pieces. That's not really a very logical move. It may also be wrong, and the move rook to c1 makes much more sense. That was what Rubinstein played here, just protecting this pawn and saying you can have the a pawn. I am willing to give back some material because I have very good development now. By the way, you cannot swoop in and capture the rook. It's protected by the bishop. Vidmar, he was not playing to win the pawn back. He was playing for maximum activity of his pieces. He must have been able also to sense that the very nervous guy he was playing, Rubinstein, was a very nervous person. He must have been able to sense that. He got him on the ropes. Not that his position was winning, or maybe even better. His position is maybe not even better, but he must have been able to sense, I have this guy, I cannot allow him to get back into his comfort zone. So he didn't take the pawn, he played pawn to f6, a very thematic move in the Budapest Defense. It looks quite simple. It threatens to come in here. It can capture with the pawn, with the knight, or the other knight, capture here on a e4. E5, I mean here on e5. But there's a little more to it than that. It also protects g5. Let's say we don't play f6. Let's say black instead captures on a2. Now white is just dominating all of a sudden with the aggressive move knight to g5, looking low on looking at f7, come in here with a very, very, very dangerous threat. Even if you castle, the momentum will have absolutely changed in white's favor. but pawn to f6 actually protects against that. Again, Rubinstein plays the best move. Pawn takes pawn on f6. Now the knight comes back. Knight takes f6, saying, "Hello, my queen," to white's queen. And we are in round 3 of the tournament. In round 4, as we saw, Karl Schlechter again employed the Budapest Defense, but played a different variation and got a draw. In round 5 of the tournament, for the 3rd time in a row, his opponent, now a guy called Jacques Mises, played this completely new opening against him. And in that version, in that game, Rubinstein tried a different way. Earlier in the game, when the queen came here to a3, instead of protecting with the rook, he went back to d3 with the queen. And he also lost that game. So there's this game. Then in the next round, he gets a draw. And in the next round, he loses the game. So that is how the Budapest Gambit entered top level tournament chess. The queen is attacked. She goes back to d3. Now it's also protecting a2. The rook can also move because it's also protecting c3. But have to say that black's position looks just very, very comfortable. And white does have the extra pawn, but look at these, like we have this rook just being trapped behind not one but 2 pawns instead of being on a nice open file like here or here. And the queen is a little bit awkward, has to maybe keep an eye on the a2 pawn. Black just has a very, very intuitive way to develop his game. He plays pawn like so to e6. And this threatens to come in with the bishop to f5, slicing, look at that, slicing into white's position. That would be a major problem for white. So Rubinstein plays, which is amazing to me, to be honest, the best move, knight to e4. So this looks after the f5 square. And it is true that if you, as black really wants to, you really want to play bishop f5 here, you can, because you can come in and capture this knight. Knight takes d4. Pawn takes d4, but now you have helped white stretch out these pawns, which is a very, very, very big advantage. Also, there's a little problem with the king. If you try to come in here, bishop with the bishop, now the queen, we can pick up a tempo against the queen with rook c3, queen moves somewhere, and then rook e3 check, and again the momentum will change in white's favor. So that is why knight to d4 works in this position here. Knight d4, looking after f5, and it cannot be captured by the c6 knight. If you notice, a critical point in that variation I just showed was the somewhat vulnerable position of black's king could be subjected to an attack on e3. There could be check here. So this is one of the many times in chess where a seemingly defensive move castles for black is actually an aggressive move, because now this counter-attacking idea for white has lost most of its venom, and here these light squares are very vulnerable. The bishop wants to come to f5, the knight wants to come to e5, e4 I mean, to attack the queen, and the best move here would have been to play pawn to f3, and it looks kind of ugly. You open up this diagonal towards your king, but there is no dark squared bishop to take advantage of this weakness, and pawn to f3 does defend against this knight jump. So it looks very weird. But that was the move to keep the little bit of opening advantage that white has, because white goes first, and with his incredible play, just basically trying to refute a brand new opening over the board. With his incredible play, Rubinstein had just about kept it until this point. But imagine playing somebody who brings an entirely new, it's not just a new move, it's just a completely different way of playing the opening in chess. Just going on the attack immediately, gambiting a pawn and not putting pieces in the center, but sort of luring you out into the center, have you set up camp, make a campfire in the center with all your pieces, and then surrounding you with all the other pieces and attacking you, making small maneuvers, having you force a concession here, make a weakness there, and your opponent maybe is just blitzing out the moves because they know this position well, they have studied it, they have had their mentor develop it for a long time, and you just sit there and you figure it out one move by move by move with your superior chess understanding. But here he faltered and didn't play pawn to f3. That was one ugly move too many for Rubinstein, and he played the much more intuitive looking pawn to e3. And maybe he thought about a variation I found when I analyzed the game, that if knight comes in, attacking the queen here, there is a sort of kind of a fancy way to meet this knight to b5, saying, well, if your knight is going to attack my queen, I'm going to attack your queen. And then we can see a crazy sequence with knight takes queen, other knight takes queen. This knight here would then capture the bishop, and then rook captures bishop, and there would actually be an even trade on material, and remember that white is still up a pawn. But that whole sequence, of course, requires one thing, that there is a knight here. And maybe Rubinstein simply couldn't believe the next move. It looks very unintuitive when you see it the first time. I remember analyzing this game the first time, and I just thought, what? You play this entire opening to make this particular double pawn weakness here with the weak c3 pawn, and then you play knight takes knight, like so, on d4, and basically solving white's problems, c takes d4, and giving Rubinstein his dream setup. And he has played so many and won so many games with this pawn set up here with pawn on e3, d4 and c4. And this is a classical chess pawn structure that you see in so many games. You see it at the World Championships today. It is It is a very, very deeply established part of correct, or our best understanding of correct chess. But 99% of chess is tactics. And there is a tactical justification here for the strategic concession. Knight to e4, attacking the queen, and this whole defensive maneuver, exchanging the queens that we saw earlier, simply does not work. There is a forced sequence now. Queen to c2, and you may rush to play bishop f5 here. Looks so good, right? All these kinds of nice discoveries where you can defend, put the knight somewhere else and defend it, defend the bishop with the knight, so the queen cannot come in and capture in any way. It's also defended by the rook. You have all these nice discovered attacks. But the problem is that if we do see bishop to f4, we can actually, Rubinstein would actually be able to play bishop to, but just bishop d3. And now white is just doing tremendous. Like, this is just a dream scenario for white. So that was not Vidmar's plan. What was his plan? Have you ever heard look for checks? Did anybody ever tell you to look for checks? That's the first thing you always want to look for. Do you have any checks? Can you find a good check? There are two good checks, and Vidmar played one of them. Queen to a4. Excuse me, queen to a5. Check. And now what do you do? So you can't block because you fall to the knight. There's just no way that would actually be checkmate like so. So paradoxically, Rubinstein played king to e2, which is the best move. Why not king to d1 instead? Well, now there is a slight difference. Now bishop to f5 really works, because bishop to d3 is no longer the very strong reply that it was. Because here, in this position, there is the tactical justification with knight takes f2, check to His Majesty, looking at the rook and also looking at the bishop. So the king will have to move, and no matter where you go, the knight can come in and capture the bishop. Perhaps if you go here, the bishop would like to capture, so that we will also get the queen. This is devastating for white. So that is why Rubinstein did not play king to d1, but instead voluntarily blocked his own bishop with king to e2. And this position was reached. Two forces met. The preparation of the strong grandmaster Milan Vidmar, the secret weapon that had been developed by his Hungarian friends and himself. That is one force that has been instrumental in reaching this position, and the other force is the absolute genius of Akiba Rubinstein. It was just move for move, finding the best or one of the best ways to stay in the game. And he is very close to be out of all of his trouble. But now Milan Vidmar showed that he is not only a famous grandmaster because he figured out a good opening once. He is also a strong positional and tactical player. And in this position, he played the move that denied Rubinstein the safe haven he had been trying and dying to get to ever since this whole madness started on move 2. Imagine being surprised as a top player, perhaps at this point the strongest or second strongest player in the world, being completely surprised in the opening on move 2. That was when this madness started, and ever since he has been just highly focused on staying in the game and trying to get to a safe haven. And he would get to a safe haven if we saw the routine move bishop to f5 here. Because in fact just queen to b2. And there is, the pawn structure is just too strong, and white is still up a pawn, and the precarious position of the king, well, it looks ugly, but in reality there is no way to, like these, for instance, check here, you could just capture it. There's no way in, really. But Vidmar was a strong player, and he could not have been in his opening preparation at this point. There's no way this late in the game that he would know he would have had this position on his board at home. So here he came up with a original and imaginative and very strong move to keep Rubinstein, on the ropes. He plays the exchange sacrifice. Rook takes f4. So this is the best move. It protects the knight. Notice that. So we cannot even decline capturing the rook with the pawn and say, instead we'll just go in and capture the knight. No, it protects the knight actually. So we have to capture that with e takes f4. And what was the point? The point was, let's expose white's king even further, and let's move with tempo. So now we can play bishop to f4. And now when the queen goes to b2, we have a follow-up threat, because now with this exchange sacrifice, this sleeping rook in the corner can join the battle with rook to e8, lining up a deadly discovered attack against the king. Believe it or not, Rubinstein could still save the game. In this position, he had to find one move. There is one move here that could save the game. Prolong the fight, maybe get a draw, or maybe even win the game if he could somehow cause black to make a mistake when black's attack runs out. The position is roughly equal due to Rubinstein's incredibly strong play up to this point. But here he really misses and he loses the game. The correct move is about this f3 square. That was also the square neglected earlier by Rubinstein, where he could have kept his advantage, and he got into an equal position instead of having the small advantage. And here again, pawn to f3. It looks like who would play that? Like, you are just inviting this discovered doubled check losing a rook. I mean, how do you find that move? But that is the way to stay in the game. So the correct continuation here is king f2, knight takes rook on h8, and then we castle by hand. King to g1, and notice it's attacking the knight. We don't even have to capture the knight because it can't escape. There's no way. Like, even if you go here, try, okay, maybe I can damage your pawn structure. This pawn structure is actually stronger for white, according to the computer, than not. And even knight to f2, the king actually kind of wants to be on this square. Both of these moves actually help white. So black can't even try to move the knight and will instead have to play something kind of passive like bishop to d7. And if that's the case, I mean, then we can safely say that Rubinstein has fought off the attack, and now it's a game. Now it's a game. At any time he can capture the knight if he feels like it, and then there will be material equality. But alas, Rubinstein did play a piece to f3, but it was the wrong piece. He played the king to f3. And here we see something very, very curious. So this is the losing move. That was when all this madness finally broke him. And it broke him so much that he lost this game. He drew with white against the same opening in the next round, and then he lost against the same opening in the fifth round. So a very good start for the Budapest Defense, but the worst tournament result of Rubinstein's life. He finished last in the tournament, even though he was the strongest player in the tournament. But nobody's better than their last move, you know. Here we saw this very curious thing where knight to d2 check. Hello, check. And it's protected by the queen over here, so we cannot capture it. So king g3, and then the best move is to go back with the knight, check, and here we could see a repetition of moves king f3. And if we saw knight d2, king here, knight back, king here, that would be a draw, which would be a tremendous result for Rubinstein, given that he has a lost position. But after black went back here, check, he did not go to f3. Rubinstein did not go to f3 trying to get the draw. And probably he had seen the winning idea for black here, which is this neat little sacrifice. Knight g5, check. You capture that. Then we have check with the bishop, bishop e4, check. And if you try to go this way, for instance, the game will end in short order with a check like this and a checkmating combination. If you try to go into the fire here, there is a discovered check. We move the bishop back. We cannot get to safety over here because of the pesky queen over here. And if we try to go to g3, queen captures on g5 and checkmate. to follow, or white will have to give up serious amounts of material to stave off checkmate, and will have a lost game. So probably that is why in this position Rubinstein did not try to repeat and go back to f3 from g3 where his king was, and instead tried to go to h4. However, this is a forced checkmate. The other variation is a lost position. You will lose a bunch of material, but maybe it will be a repetition. There is hope. There is just no hope after king h4. So you have to find the winning idea, and maybe you can see what would you do. How would you get at this king here? And if you, I can give you a hint here, a little hint. If you have watched some of my Budapest games, or my introduction maybe to the opening in my opening video, or just some of the games where I play it, you will know that the rover, the rook up and over, the rook lift is a very, very common theme in the Budapest Defense. In the Adler variation, we have all these games with pawn a5, rook a6, and rook h3 going for a very strong attack. Here we do something very similar. Rook e6, the threatening, devastating check on h6. Rook. So after rook to e6, we see the only move, bishop to e2, so that we can block after rook h6, bishop h5, and that blocks the check. But here we see the coup de grace. Rook takes bishop, that is check. King takes rook. The final move of the game, bishop g6, that is check from the bishop, but also from the queen. And the queen will be the deciding factor. The king has two moves. In fact, Rubinstein resigned the game here, but had he played either move, two legal moves, either king h4 or king to g5, the same move would have ended the game, namely queen h5, checkmate. And that is the game. And that was how one of the absolute most legendary chess players just met this bizarre new opening and lost the entire tournament because of it. And we have seen history being written with chess openings quite a number of times. I think the best and most important example is when Vladimir Kramnik, the Russian chess genius, positional chess genius, was playing for the World Championship. He was challenging Garry Kasparov, who is, to my mind and to Magnus Carlsen's mind, the greatest chess player in history. So I feel pretty confident about that claim. When Magnus agrees with me, it can't be completely wrong. And Kasparov was at the height of his career in the year 2000. He had the highest rating of all times. He was crushing people left and right. He was playing tremendous chess. And he had this just unbelievable attacking energy to just overwhelm his opponents. And then here comes Kramnik and looks in the annals of chess and in the old chess books from back in the 18th century, and he finds this Berlin defense, this just useless bad opening that nobody likes and nobody plays, and it's dull and it's boring. And he takes it seriously, and he looks at it, 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 until he finds a way to play this dull opening with black in such a way that he can almost force a draw. It's just impossible to win with white against it. And Kasparov tries and tries and tries, and he cannot break. In the many games they played in that World Championship, he cannot break the Berlin defense. And therefore he loses the match and loses his World Championship crown. And there are many examples like that in chess history. And now we even see AlphaZero and the computers. They are now inventing new openings, doing extremely aggressive stuff that nobody thought was possible. So it's a fascinating world to me. And from a practical point of view, if you want to go out and win some games, it is a very, very good idea to study some openings and maybe come up with some ideas of your own to catch your opponent off guard. On a final note, I should say Rubinstein, after the tournament and his abysmal result, the worst result of his career, Rubinstein did challenge Vidmar to a match that unfortunately never materialized. But he really wanted revenge because he had just had this absolutely abysmal result, the worst result in his tournament career, because of the Budapest Defense. I hope you liked the video. I hope I will see you in the